Hello, everyone. My name is Miriam Lazarte. I'm CEO at Latam Startups. Thank you for joining us today. We are presenting a webinar, The State of Fintech in Canada, because this month, Fintech is in the spotlight. And this webinar is sponsored by ProGivers. This is a new crowdfunding platform based in Mexico, and they also have an office actually in Toronto. So they are supporting all kind of initiatives to raise money to different projects. So for those that are looking forward to raise money for your own startups or for any other kind of initiatives, just go ahead and take a look at ProGivers. Latam Startups is a non-profit organization based in Toronto helping startups to scale. Thank you for attending today this webinar. And let's start with, with our webinar here. So before everything, if you have any questions at the end of the webinar, we are going to be responding the first three questions we get. Just send it through contact@latamstartups.biz or to the hashtag LatamStartups. Now, let's start with our webinar. So, according with the report provided by Global and Mail, global financing for fintech companies had reached 20 billion USD in 2015, having the top 18 fintech companies with a valuation over 50 billion in those companies, and those companies are creating really high quality jobs. It's important to notice new fintech companies are growing up in some hubs around the world, and Toronto plays a big role in the financial service sector. There are more financial institutions with a market cap over 50 billion in Greater Toronto area than in New York, London. Toronto is an important and highly concentrated customer base. So this is important really for all of you to understand why is that important that we always name Canada between this formula regarding fintech. It's because we have a really strong financial sector. As we have probably mentioned in other webinars, Toronto is really well connected with cities as New York, Boston, others here in the USA, and as well in Europe. So really, in specific, this city in Canada as a concentrated startups in the fintech area. We have, of course, our cities in Canada that also are providing more startups in fintech as Vancouver and Montreal and Ottawa, and the corridor of Waterloo that we are going to talk a little bit more in the next slides. So GTA banks and insurance executives are considered important partners for fintech companies. These institutions come with experience in different areas, whether it's regulation, risk management, compliance, and others. Banks and insurance companies also hire thousands of engineers and coders to digitize their operations, providing critical training, business, and commercialization. Canada Financial Services is concentrated in many other sectors here, subsectors we will say. More than 100 fintech companies in Canada are penetrating sectors like retail, payment, and e-commerce, consumer lending, investment management, and market analyzing. According with a study by The Economist, Canada is home of 3 of the world's top 10 most livable cities. Our advantage goes beyond the world-class education system. Millennials are also attracted to our rich culture, security, diversity, and cultural tolerance. This is one of the most important parts about Canada, and specific as a country. We are a very diverse country, and we have talked as well about this in other webinars. So it's important for you guys to understand that diversity is also a key factor in developing new startups. So we get talent from many other countries in the world. And that talent and that combined, critical mass is what is building right now a very strong fintech ecosystem here in Canada. Now, if you're curious about this and you need to have like a more deep information, we're going to share a report after this webinar so you can actually learn from other sources in Canada. How is the fintech sector developed? As well, it's really important to tell you that just recently we got another report, in the market telling how Canada is actually getting not just strong in fintech, but also in cybersecurity startups. So this is kind of like we have many ecosystems booming up all around Canada. It depends, of the area that you're looking for. But certainly fintech is one of those areas that is really, really, really important for us. So according with the Mars Discovery District, one of the most important innovation centers in Canada, 350,000 people have been employed by 12,000 firms by 2015. These numbers positioned Toronto as the third hub in North America and the ninth in the world. One of the best representatives, fintech company currently one of the Canadian's unicorns is Shopify, combining a fintech solution with an e-commerce. This company is valuated over $1 billion, as many of you already know. Shopify already has an IPO, so they are actually, one of the most strongest unicorns that we have. More than 300 patents related with financial technology has been granted to inventors based in Canada. So this report that you guys can see here actually, shows like 10 different factors of the fintech sector in Canada. And for those that don't know Mars Discovery District, Mars is actually the sector here in Toronto. We have others in Ontario, like Communitech, others than that. But Mars has actually like a fintech sector is one of the most strongest sectors that they have, and they are developing innovation on that. So let's continue with our next slide. So Reuters reported venture capital financing of Canadian fintech was $130.7 million in 2016, which is up around 35% from the year earlier. 5 years ago, investment in dollars were around $21 million, and that was in 2000 actually. In that year, the investment was $7.3 million. So you can see that in the last 16 years, investment really has raised in Canada, especially in the venture capital sector. So Thomson Reuters data show a close to 74% increase from 2015 to 2016 in terms of investment in Canadian fintech companies. While in investment dollars are tiny compared to the 4.27 billion investment in the USA during the 2016. Investment are increasing in Canada at the time. They are declining in both US and UK, so in England. Reuters reported investments in fintech in the US dropped 30% or more. And actually in England, the drop was 25%. So it's really like a similar situation that is happening in the USA. And investment in fintech companies in Singapore also fell 65% in 2016. So let's say for a global stage, Canada is relatively small market, but it's one of the best markets to build a company around innovation because we have a great test market, great infrastructure for financial services, according to Adam Ananji, who heads the FinTech group in Toronto Mars Research Hub. So you can see here that actually investment is kind of like a going opposite side in Canada in regarding the other hubs that we have in the world in fintech. So this is really positive for fintech companies that are, kind of developing in other countries that probably test their services here in Canada as a point of entry for North America or even for Europe. This is kind of like a global point of launch fintech companies. So it's really important for you guys. If you are in the fintech area, this is a strong fintech hub here. So let's talk a little bit more about Toronto Waterloo corridor. This is an important corridor that we have in Canada regarding technology and innovation. There are geographic and economic reasons why Ontario, and specifically Toronto Waterloo corridor, is well suited to be fintech center of Canada. Fintech companies doing business in Toronto benefit from one of the lowest software development costs in the industrialized world. Running a software development center in Toronto is much more affordable than in London or in New York City, which is one of the main reasons why the Canadian software industry has grown 23% from 2009 to 2014. So based on the combined cost of labor, utilities, telecommunications, and property, the cost of operations and data center is also more affordable in Toronto than any other cities around. Toronto fintech sector can also take advantage of a broad-based system of research and development tax credits. And from the federal to the provincial government, we all always have those kind of tax credit that also, gives a totally support to fintech companies that are researching in this area. This can reduce the gross cost of 100 Canadian in research to $42. So, regarding the compare, so if you are actually, the cost of researching for you is $100, the tax credits can do, low that cost to $42, which is amazing. 42 to 54 is the actually average number there. Depending of the size and type of the company. So depending of that, you actually can apply for the research and development tax credits. So the Toronto Waterloo FinTech Corridor is spanning just over 100 kilometers. It's located in the southern Ontario, just north of the US border, and it's part of the second largest IT cluster in North America. Over 6 million people live and work in this area. Ontario is also the birthplace and home of a number of leading technologies companies, including OpenText, Sandvine, and Dig Plus Age. These are more financial institutions with market cap over 50 billion in the GTA. So this is kind of like the information we passed in the slide before that. Actually, we have more of those companies here than in New York and London, which is critical for nearly the 50% of the fintech companies that focus in business to business sales. So you can see here that actually the Toronto Waterloo corridor is really important for us. From Toronto to Waterloo, for those that have been part of our startup ecosystem tours, we usually go to Waterloo every year and to Toronto. And sometimes we have been able to go with groups to Montreal and Ottawa and meet the tech ecosystems there. So for those that have been part of those startup ecosystem tours, you know that from Toronto to Waterloo is more or less 2 hours that we spend between, traveling between the two cities. So it's not really far away. And in between, you have many other companies that are also part of this great startup ecosystem that we have here in this area. So, but we also have other cities in Canada that, are developing also fintech companies. And I specifically, I love Vancouver because I used to live there. But the city also is really, really strong in the startup ecosystem in general terms, and of course also in fintech. So, as the home of the financial sector in Canada, Toronto might seem the logical place to think of when it comes to fintech. But however, Vancouver is home of too many startups, and it is currently touting itself as the best place in Canada to foster growth and innovation in fintech. Being smaller and more contained, Vancouver has an advantage, is that fintech companies are closer in proximity than in Toronto, and the community is still relatively small. Vancouver is also a great city for sustainability, and something that is very appealing when dealing with financial companies. Vancouver is also a great city to attract people because it's livability, and the talent does not leave the city due to the great lifestyle that is afforded. The high quality of life and wealth in of talent available, along with visa options for international recruitment, make a great city for fintech. Despite being a perceived disadvantage to the distance from the epicenter of Canada financial service industry, Vancouver has much to offer that differentiates itself from Toronto, notably being far removed from established banking corporate culture and conventional old school thinking and philosophies as real those are real straight for Vancouver fintech firms. It is also important to understand that Vancouver is closer to Silicon Valley than Toronto, for example. So really a flight from Vancouver to San Francisco is 2 hours. So you don't really spend too much time, in traveling, while Vancouver to Toronto, a flight is around 6 hours. So you can see there is a big difference. Sometimes that's why, the verticals and the way that people work is startup ecosystem here, probably the culture base of Vancouver is more similar to Silicon Valley, and Toronto kind of aligns with New York in that way. So there are two different, they are two different cities. Vancouver for sure is more like when I was there, it was more that like a city for green tech, clean tech companies. For sure, applications. We have um, a great unicorn there, which is Hootsuite. Probably many of you also kind of play with that application. We do. We use Hootsuite all the time, and Hootsuite is the house. Vancouver is the house. So this is a great place for many startups. I know many of our Brazilian startups are, for example, living there because of the way that you live in Vancouver is warmer. It has many other advantages. So here I like to show you also our top fintech companies that you can research a little bit more. We are going to have in our report kind of like a summary of what these fintech companies do in Canada. But you can see here we have our Shopify as one of the unicorns, and Grow also, as the name is growing really fast in the in the startup ecosystem in fintech. So here you have 10 examples, and for those that are actually watching this webinar, you are going to see at the report what they do and where are they located. Actually, many of them are in Montreal as well. So there you go. It's really, really a good database. Now, for fintech challenges that we have here, so a study conducted by EY Canada shines some insights into the challenges facing fintechs in Canada. Fintech adoption rates in Canada are lower than in other countries. According to EY Canada, a study published in January 2016, only 8.2% of the digitally active consumers in Canada have used at least two fintech products within the last 6 months, says Gregory Smith, which is partner at EY, the financial service advisory practice. What is interesting note is that the awareness is more common reason for this and the trust. You know, for digital active responders who haven't used two or more fintech products in the past 6 months, more than half, 57.2%, say they were unaware the products actually existed. Only 10.3% of the Canadians say they are not using fintech because they don't trust them. So Canadian financial institutions have traditionally enjoyed consistently high levels of consumer trust, and yet only 10% of the digital active consumers report lack of trust as a reason for not using fintech products. So there you go. We have some also challenges here, but it seems like for what EY is saying is not about trusting really, because that is a low percent, but it's more like there is the awareness that these fintech companies actually exist. So I think here there is a need in a way good marketing strategy, and to put the information out about the services these fintech companies are doing or are providing to the market. So fintech has been described as being disruptive force to the current financial industry. And fintech identify pain points in the financial services and solve them through mobile technology and digital business model, operating without the enormous infrastructure, technical depth, and regulatory hindrances of the large financial institutions. Fintech are bringing to the market cheaper, faster, and more customer-centric financial services. The recruitment of top talent from both recently graduates and experienced people by fintech startups are also another challenge for banks that banks must deal with. Um, so greater learning opportunities, less red tape, and the chance to work on problems they feel genuinely passionate about are some of the reasons cited by those who have jobs in traditional financial institutions for a role at a tech-savvy startup. In an effort to attract tech-savvy new talent, some of the big Canadian banks are modifying their workplaces to bring them more in line with what one might see in Silicon Valley. The growing popularity and possible threat to the profits are forcing banks to respond one of several ways. Fan of these startups, acquire them or become them partners, and the result as a recently PwC survey of a global banking CEO found that more than 80% of respondents said that they consider fintech competitive threat. And this is true, actually, in our last Latam Startups conference in Mexico, we actually saw that actually BBVA, which is one of the main banks in Latin America, also consider like a main competition today startups more than other banks. So banks are really realizing the importance of collaboration and investment in fintech, especially at the early stage. Scotiabank digital factory mission is to become the undisputable innovator in mobile and digital banking. So Scotiabank has also a really strong presence in Latin America for those that are watching us in Latin America. So they also are putting together like a digital factory space that will be home to 350 developers, user experience design engineers, data scientific tasked with creating digital solutions for banks' 23 million customers. So this is a huge step for banks to actually realize how to work with, with the startups in fintech. So Scotiabank, for example, has pledged that to invest 3 million over the 10 years to create a digital banking lab and the Ivy Business School at the University of Western Ontario. Royal Bank recently also launched an innovation lab in Silicon Valley to work with startups, which complement the existing labs in Toronto, Luxembourg, New York, and Orlando. The Bank of Montreal announced also partnership with Ryerson University, existing business incubators for startups, DMC, which is one of our main partners for Latam startups, to create something called the Next Big Idea FinTech, which was a competition that they just launched in 2016, and it was very successful competition. They are kind of like getting those very strong startups developed for Bank of Montreal. Toronto Dominion Bank TD has opened a lab in Waterloo and is the city of in the city at Community Tech Innovation Center, which is the other innovation center that we have in Ontario, to work with startups. And CIBC planted its digital flag at the Mars Discovery District in Toronto. So with a goal to creating corporate innovation hub to explore financial technology opportunities. So you can see here that actually there are many banks that are doing something interesting in the market to actually put together hubs and innovation centers, working together with universities, with currently existing in incubators and innovation centers in not just in Ontario, but in different places. So they can actually compete with the startups, and not just the competition is the part, but also the acquisition and the partnering with those startups and with the community in general, with the critical mass that we have here in order to build those, digital new startups that they need for the next years. So this is basically the main part of the information about FinTech in Canada. And now we are open to questions. So if you have any question, please go ahead and send us to contact@latamstartup.biz or through the hashtag LatamStartups, and we are happy to answer your questions. So in the meantime, while you are kind of thinking in what are your questions at this point, we actually can, reminding you that we have next week our next webinar about FinTech, where we are putting together some questions to experts in FinTech. So we are going to talk about the challenges that this sector has and also the opportunities. So these experts are from Canada and Latin America. So we have here, for example, Eduardo Sete and Alejandro from Argentina, and Melanie Campbell from Canada. And we are adding another one from Canada that probably works with the Mars Discovery District. So you can actually, ask questions directly to them. This is a webinar for 1 hour. We're going to ask about 7 to 8 questions about how it's going to evolve the startup ecosystem. And it's important also to notice that one of the challenges that we have in Canada is also the emerging markets that are providing really critical and good high quality startups in the fintech sector. So this is really, really good. So I'm listening here. Probably we have some questions. Okay. So also we are going to have FinTech into Spotlight. This is Latam Chats that we have every month. So in January 25th, please join us in a chat. If you have a FinTech company, just send us an email to contact@latamstartup.biz. If you want to be part of the conversation, we can send you questions that we are going to be talking that day, on January 25th at 12 p.m. as well. And then please remember that we are closing applications for the Latam Startups Hub very soon. So if you have a startups, especially in fintech, because we are based here in Toronto, so you can actually apply for the Startup Hub. And that's basically it. My name is Miriam Lasarte. I'm co-founder of Latam Startups, and it has been a pleasure to be your host today. We hope that the information we're passing here is good for you, and it will serve you as a startup, in fintech. Or if you have any other questions, later on when you receive the report, please don't hesitate to contact us. We're happy to answer any questions you have in this, and we are happy also to connect you with the ecosystem here. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you next week in the next webinar. Thank you.